The tow truck driver gave a look to the foreigner guy behind my dad, who then grabbed my dad by the shoulders, pulling his arms back to restrain him. My dad struggled, trying to break free, but he couldn't. Then, as the tow truck driver moved closer to search his pockets again, my dad suddenly kicked him in the stomach, and suddenly, my mom, as soon as she heard the sound of gunfire, immediately covered her ears and let go of me. I unlocked the door and ran straight down with my brother James. When we arrived, we saw my dad lying down and bleeding. Of course, the tow truck driver and the two guys with him. You know, the truck is big, so if you start it, it won't move right away. It takes time to get it going and moving. They were sitting inside, just staring at us so shamelessly, while we were down there or next to my dad. The tow truck driver kept shouting,
"Move him! Don't let him die on you!"
James and I, despite how young we were, all we wanted was to defend our dad, but we couldn't. There was no way. You know, back then, there were no cell phones with cameras to capture the truck's license plate, or even time to memorize the plate number to report them later. All we cared about was how to save our dad. Of course, that motherfucker. What did he do? He shot my dad twice. The first shot hit my dad's thigh, and the second hit his leg. But thank God, the first shot that hit his thigh was a slight graze. It didn't fully enter his thigh. As for the second shot that hit his leg, how do I explain it? It didn't hit exactly on the bone, but right beside it, in the muscle. The wound was so deep, and my dad was bleeding heavily. So James and I rushed to the car, and as soon as we got him in and my mom saw that he was bleeding, she broke down. The distance from where we were to the village was very far, and my mom was really scared for my dad. He was bleeding, and honestly, we were all terrified that he could die on us at any moment on the way. My mom got in the back with him, and James sat in the front where my mom usually sat, and we headed to the village as fast as possible. When we finally got there, it was really late at night. My mom said,
"Mark, stop by your aunt's house quickly."
I said, "No, Mom, we can't." "What do you mean stop at Aunt's house while Dad is bleeding? Let me find a clinic or a hospital to treat his leg." My mom said,
"Son, understand, we're in a small village. You're not going to find any clinic or hospital open at this hour. Go to your aunt's house quickly."
Of course, I didn't argue much with my mom. At that time, I was already confused and didn't know how to act. James was the same as me, so I thought, all right, let's just go and see what she wants. When we got to my aunt's house, which was technically my grandmother's house because my aunt was divorced and lived there with her 7 young kids. She had one older son, Tom, who was married and lived on his own in a house nearby. Everyone was asleep at that time. James went back to my mom and said,
"Mom, no one's opening the door. I knocked until my hand was sore."
Jump over the wall, unlock the door, do something quickly. Your dad is dying.
So James climbed over the wall, unlocked the door from the inside, and after he opened everything up, we drove the car into the yard.
My husband is dead. My husband is dead.
Everyone was panicking, asking, "What's wrong? What's wrong, Mom?" I finally stepped in and calmed the situation down, telling them, "It's okay, thank God. Dad is fine. It's just a wound in his leg, that's all. He's not dead." Anyway, my mom told my aunt quickly, "Get your clothes on. Let's go." My aunt said, "Of course." She hurried to put on her abaya, got in the car, and they told me to drive as fast as I could to the place they'd described. Now I was driving, not knowing anything about the area, just following my aunt's directions. The road, guys, was so dark, and as you know, village roads can be really scary. I kept going right, left, and straight until my aunt guided us to the house of an old woman. This old lady had a reputation that spread throughout the village. She was known for treating people with traditional medicine. Even though we showed up very late at night, you should have seen how kind she was to us. She opened the door, trembling, barely able to move, and greeted us with concern.
"What's wrong? Is everything okay?"
My mom was crying and could barely calm down enough to explain that my dad was injured and we needed help. The woman said,
"Don't worry, it'll be all right. Where is your husband?"
Right away, James and I got my dad out of the car and laid him down in a room on a bed. The old woman went into her kitchen, pulled out some bags, and started mixing herbs, water, and even some kind of pickle. I had no idea what she was doing. After all that effort, she came up with some mixture that looked like thick mud. Now, she thought it was just a regular wound and intended to apply the mixture and be done with it. She had no idea there was still a bullet lodged inside my dad's leg. So, when the old woman pulled up her chair to get closer to my dad's bed and start treating him, she noticed the cloth that James and I had tied around his leg when we first got him out of the car. It was soaked with blood. Right away, she could tell the wound was serious based on her experience. As soon as she untied the cloth, she was shocked by how deep the wound was. She asked.
How did he get injured? Did he fall or what happened?
You know how older women are. They know the roads and the dangers well. She started giving us some advice, saying we shouldn't have even traveled at night. Anyway, she then said,
I can't treat him right now unless I remove the bullet from his leg.
Guys, how do I describe it? I remember when we saw how deep the bullet was lodged in my dad's leg. It was embedded in the calf muscle, right next to the bone, and it was really stuck inside. It was going to be hard to get it out. The old woman went to the kitchen and came back with some cloth and a few tools. I'm not sure what exactly they were, but she planned to use them to remove the bullet. She stretched out my dad's leg and told James,
Hold his leg steady so it doesn't move, and you, Mark, hold his arms like a man and keep him still. The pain is unbearable.
She grabbed my dad's leg, opened the wound with her hands, and carefully inserted the tweezers. She grasped the tip of the bullet, and as soon as she started pulling, oh my God, my dad, strong and tough as he is, I had never seen him scream like that. He was in so much pain, screaming, Please, I'm dying. Have mercy on me. After she finally removed the bullet, my dad calmed down a bit and felt some relief, but he was still bleeding. The old woman took out her thick mixture, like henna, and applied it to the wound. Then she wanted to wrap his leg, but the cloth we had was soaked with blood and couldn't be reused. So, I ran to the car, opened James's trunk, grabbed one of his t-shirts, and handed it to the old woman. Honestly, when I tell you that the old woman was kind, I truly mean it. She was so kind. Despite all the help she gave us and the effort she put in, she didn't take a single penny. My mom opened her purse and pulled out some money, insisting, Please take it for God's sake, trying to offer it to her, but the old woman refused, saying, I swear I won't take a dime. We thanked her and wrapped things up. When we got back to my aunt's house, we were getting ready to help my dad out of the car. James and I were about to carry him inside, but my dad said,
I'm not getting out.
We were like, What's going on? My dad said,
Take me to your uncle's house.
We told him, Dad, you're tired. You need to rest. We can take you tomorrow. What's the problem? But he insisted.
No, take me to your uncle's house.
Honestly, he had a point. My grandmother's house was really small, and like I told you, it was crowded with my aunt and her 7 kids. So, after we dropped off my mom and her important belongings from the car, James and I headed to my uncle's house. As we were on our way, we ran into our older cousin Tom, the one I mentioned earlier. I swear, no matter how much I praise him, it wouldn't be enough. He's a stand-up guy in every sense of the word. The things he did for us, I'll never forget them. And to this day, my relationship with my cousin Tom is one of the best I've ever had. We ran into Tom, and he greeted us, saying,
Where have you guys been? You just got back from the trip and look exhausted. Take it easy.
I told him, honestly, Tom, as you can see, my dad is really worn out, and his leg is bleeding. He was shocked and said,
What happened?
He immediately opened the back door and saw my dad lying there, exhausted, while James and I were sweating and embarrassed, not knowing where to look. We were afraid my dad would tell him the whole story and think, what kind of guys are these two who couldn't even defend their father? Anyway, Tom closed the door and then came up to me saying, Follow me. I replied, But Tom, my dad won't accept it. He insisted that.
Your dad is lying down and doesn't even know where he is. Just follow me. You don't need to worry about it.
So, I followed him, and he took us behind my grandmother's house. There was a room back there, somewhat isolated but not abandoned or empty. You could say it was a place where my dad could rest. We parked the car, and Tom got out, telling James,
Come here, James. Leave Mark with his dad.
James went in and cleaned up the room from the dust, tidying everything up, including the bed. Then Tom himself, I swear, carried my dad all by himself and brought him into that room. We said, Let us help you, Tom said.
No, thank you. I'm fine.
You've already done enough for us, my son. I actually wanted my kids to take me to my brother's house so I could rest better.
Whether you're at your brother's house or here with us, it's all the same and we'll take good care of you, I swear. Honestly, if I had known I wouldn't be so busy with my kids and my house is already full, I would have brought you to stay with me and let you rest.
After we settled down and my dad was asleep, Tom signaled for James and me to come outside with him. We got into his car, and he locked the doors. He turned on the interior light and starts investigating with us. Now Tom, as I told you, is married and about 5 or 6 years older than us. He was around 23 or so. He started talking about my dad, and you can't imagine how embarrassed we were. James, being James, always has a knack for the wrong moment, just blurted out,
We bought a PlayStation? That's way better than this?
Tom was asking about my dad, and here's James going off on something else. I thought, oh my God, listen to me. I'll tell you the whole story from A to Z, starting from when we left the house until my dad pulled out the gun. Tom laughed and said,
Oh man, look at this guy.
He was joking because, you know, we were kids. and he was older. He wanted to lighten the mood a bit. And when he saw we were feeling embarrassed, he said to James,
Where's the PlayStation? Bring it on. Let's go try it out.
James went and opened my bag to pull out the PlayStation and everything. And Tom got inside and brought out a TV. Not a plasma or HD screen like these days. It was an old regular TV. We went outside to the yard, moved some chairs together, and set them around the table. Tom also made some tea for us to lighten the mood while we played. As for me, I didn't last long. I played a couple of games and felt really exhausted because, we had just traveled. James was even worse. He was almost falling asleep. We were just pretending to play. And when Tom saw us dozing off, he said,
All right, turn it off and come with me.
He took us into the room with the little kids. It was really cramped, but we didn't have any other choice since we were dead tired. I swear, I just threw myself down without even knowing where I landed and fell asleep immediately. We didn't wake up until we heard my mom calling us in the afternoon. James and I got up and went outside to the yard to get some fresh air. To our surprise, we found Tom with 4 guys bringing a truck into the yard and unloading large cooking utensils that they use for gatherings. I was excited and asked him because I thought there must be some occasion or something. It was just too surprising, and they hadn't even informed us the day before. When I went over to him and asked, and also greeted the guys with him, I said, Tom, what are you all doing? He told me,
We're having dinner today to celebrate your dad's recovery and all of your safe arrival.
After the dinner started, more guests began to arrive, and we started welcoming them and serving coffee. James and I noticed something very strange. An old man entered through the door, and the dinner was outside in the yard. When he came in, he went straight to a corner and sat there by himself. Even the coffee server, whom we thought might at least offer him a cup of coffee, didn't go over. It felt inappropriate, after all, for a guest to be ignored like that. The old man came in without any greetings or words. He was just there to eat and leave. James said,
What's going on here? Not even a greeting? He walks in like he doesn't see anyone?
I said, Come on, man, it's not right. Finally, dinner time came, and we set the table. We started to serve the dishes, but that old man didn't get up. He stayed in his corner. Honestly, guys, you can't imagine how much it broke my heart. They treated the man like a dog. What did Tom do? He got a small plate and served some food from the same dish that James and I were eating from, and then he went and gave it to the old man. James and I were shocked by the treatment. We immediately picked up our plates and went to sit with him. Oh God, I wish we hadn't, guys. The smell was terrible, literally rotten. The man's clothes were so dirty they had turned brown. Putting that aside, we stuck it out until he finished eating and filled his stomach. After he was done, he picked up his slipper in one hand and his cane in the other and started walking barefoot. It was around midnight when the guests began to leave one by one until the yard was completely empty. It was just me, my dad, James and Tom. James and I went straight to Tom and said, Sorry, Tom, what's up with the way you're treating that old man? He replied,
What do you mean treating him? What are you talking about?
What kind of treatment is it to give him a plate alone like that while he's sitting there like a poor man? And why didn't you even welcome him?
Come on, just drop it. Let's pack up and go.
Tom, this is serious. What are you doing? Why are you treating him like that? He's just an old man.
Are you serious right now? You don't even know who he is?
I said, No, honestly, I don't. James replied,
I don't know either.
You should go ask your dad.
So we went to our dad and asked, Dad, who is that old man who came in? He seemed strange and no one paid him any attention. And guys, here comes the shock. Dad said,
That's your grandfather.
Dad, are you serious or what? Is something wrong?
Yes, you don't know anything. The old man has all sorts of illnesses, and the last time he had a stroke, he didn't want to get up from it. And now you're all acting shocked? Of course he's going to change.
May God heal him, Dad said in a soft voice.
May God not heal him, and he wouldn't get up after the stroke.
James and I were stunned. I mean, why is everyone treating him like this? What did he do? Now let me clarify. This old man is not my real grandfather. He's my dad's uncle. My real grandfather, may God rest his soul, is not the same man. This old man is related to my grandfather through breastfeeding, so he's not even a blood relative. Anyway, we don't have a house of our own in the village, so Dad would take us to my late grandfather's house, and we'd stay there until the vacation was over. The location of my grandfather's house was honestly a really scary place. Imagine being on the edge of a valley, and right next to it was a graveyard. James and I would sometimes open the windows, and I swear, it opened directly onto the valley. And the valley, my friends, was completely dark. You could only hear the sounds of dogs, frogs, and the night insects. It was really terrifying. Plus, right next to the house, as I mentioned, was the graveyard. You know what that means. The valley and the graveyard were both homes and habitats for jinn, God forbid. This was the main reason we hated being in the village, which was my grandfather's house. Of course, since the old man was my grandfather's brother by breastfeeding, they lived in the same house, so he still lives there. He lives on the first floor, and our actual grandfather lived on the second. After 2 days, my dad's health improved, thank God. And he realized that our presence in my aunt's and grandmother's house was unnecessary since the house was small and cramped for them. So he said,
Pack your things because we're moving to your grandfather's house.
This was the moment that James and I had been dreading. We said, Okay, Dad, but what's the problem if we stay in Grandma's house? You have a room outside for yourself, and you can rest. I don't see it as a bother. He replied.
No, just pack your things like I told you, and between you and me, your mom also talked to me.
And as we were packing, suddenly Tom showed up at around 8 p.m. He said that we couldn't leave now because his mom had made dinner, so we should come down, chat, and have dinner. And we did go down, but when my family went downstairs, I stayed in the car. Tom did something surprising. He opened the glove compartment of the car and placed $2,000 for my dad. Of course, he knew, since we had informed him that my dad had been shot and robbed. He put the money in there and closed it, saying,
Don't tell your dad until you get to your grandfather's house.
Because he knew that if he mentioned it or offered the money to my dad would never accept it. Anyway, we had dinner, finished everything, and left the house around that time. As we were driving on the road, James and I were extremely anxious. What made me even more nervous and piqued our curiosity was that every year when we arrived at my grandfather's house, my dad would say,
Beware of your grandfather. Don't get too close to him. Treat him like a pole or a garbage can.
James and I would think that, how long are they going to keep this from us? What's up with this old man? Even my mom, when we would ask her sometimes, would say,
I don't know. Your dad doesn't tell me.
As soon as we got out of the car and unloaded some of our things, he was sitting in the yard, giving us looks that were anything but normal. He was sitting across from his room, you know, in an old-fashioned way, with a table and an old television. He was leaning on his bed, resting his chin on his hand and watching us. The moment we entered through the gate, he jumped up, looking at us with very strange eyes, as if he was thinking to himself, These are my prey, and they've come to me. My dad said,
Don't look at him.
And I replied, But Dad, he's your uncle. It's a greeting from a distance. My dad insisted.
Just go, keep quiet.
We entered the house, which was dusty. You know, after our trip, it was in terrible condition. We took out the mattresses and belongings and started cleaning off the dust. Meanwhile, he was looking at us from afar, trying to figure out what we were doing. Once we brought everything inside, there was a bathroom in the house, but unfortunately, it was unused. The lights were out, and there wasn't even a water tank. So we had to use the outdoor bathroom in the corner of the yard. We had to pass by the old man since he used the same bathroom, but it was also in bad shape and without lighting. My dad tossed me the car keys and said,
Mark, go to the car and grab the flashlight from the glove compartment.
Of course, he wanted me to get the flashlight because, as you all know, the bathroom was dark, and the lighting in the yard was very poor. The flashlight would really help us out. At that moment, I was really scared and wanted my brother Mark to come with me. But Mark was sitting with my mom and dad, and I didn't want to say, Hey Mark, come with me, because that would make me lose face in front of my dad. He was always telling me to watch over my mom and brother, so it wouldn't be good for him to see me scared. Anyway, I gathered my courage and headed to the car. It was truly dark. Imagine the moment I stepped out the door. The valley was right next to me, and the graveyard was directly beside the yard. I opened the car door. I had just stepped inside when I heard a stone being thrown behind me. I said, Mark, for the love of God, stop messing around. I just wanted to grab the flashlight and leave. I got into the car, shut the door, and as I fumbled for the keys in the glove compartment, I was trying to hurry and get the flashlight out. Then, after a moment, I heard the sound of the zipper of the bag being opened and closed. The problem, guys, was that every time I tried to slowly open the glove compartment, the sound would increase. I would pull my hand back, and the sound would stop. But on the last attempt, the sound suddenly intensified, as if someone was holding the bag and messing with the zipper. I turned around, and I wish I hadn't. Imagine in the darkness of the car, I saw a figure of a woman sitting in the back of the trunk, opening and closing our bags. Honestly, I couldn't see her features at all, It was just a dark shadow. All I saw was this black shadow moving and rummaging through the bags. Well, guys, what I saw was anything but normal. The darkness I was looking at had hair, messy, tangled hair that fell over her face. I quickly screamed, "In the name of the God," and cautiously turned to look forward when I saw my brother standing right by the door. I signed him to come closer so I could get out. The shock, guys, was that he was just staring at me, smiling. Then he zoned out. The moment I saw James zone out, I opened the glove compartment with all my strength, grabbed the flashlight, and bolted out. As soon as I stepped out, I opened the door, and my mom and dad were surprised. Honestly, guys, my face was pale, sweaty, and I was breathing rapidly. You could see the fear in me. My mom asked,
My dear, why are you so scared?
I didn't want to worry my dad, so I said, "No, nothing. I just rushed out for something urgent." Anyway, I handed my dad the flashlight and went to the room, where I found James organizing his bags. This room is where my mom, James, and I would sleep. My dad had his own room in the middle, which was the kitchen area, and it was neglected. I grabbed James and said, "You little brat." He replied,
What's up? What's wrong?
I said, "What do you mean? What's wrong? Did you not see me signaling you in the car, asking you to stop while you smiled and zoned out?" He said,
I swear you look like you've smoked something. I didn't even leave the room.